Hi, I'm Katya. I want to tell you a story about my little brother Kirill, or rather, how he almost destroyed our family. He and I have an age difference of only 1.5 years, so I don't remember at what point in life he appeared. Mom told me that my father really wanted a son, and just a few months after me, my mother became pregnant again. However, something went wrong and we couldn't get along with him. We fought all the time. We couldn't share anything. He was just an unruly child. Mom and dad fought over him because he messes up all the time. He breaks something, hits something. I don't remember the first years of my childhood, but when we got older, playing with my brother was more like a competition and an attempt to survive in an unequal battle. Although Kira was younger, lower and lighter in weight than me, he always offended me and climbed to fight. When parents brought home toys, Kira broke his own in 10 minutes and then he got to mine. I was crying sitting by my toys, and he was running around the room with the doll's head torn off. This prankster took scissors and cut off the stuffed animal's ears and legs, and all the toys were deprived of their heads while laughing loudly. Mom and Dad often tried to explain that this should not be done. He seemed to be listening, but not understanding. The next day, the same thing continued. When he went to school, he could not make friends. He did not find a common language with anyone and preferred to be alone. When his classmates performed at concerts, he was the only one who didn't participate in the school's life. He said that he only takes pleasure in destroying something. Every year, he came up with something new. He would throw the phone under the car, then leave the faucet in the bathroom open, then add poison to the neighbor's dog in a bowl. And from all sides, complaints poured into the parents. In addition to teachers and neighbors, school doctors sometimes came to complain. Your son stole cotton wool, alcohol, and arson in the corridor from the medical unit. Your son turned over the entire first aid kit and mixed all the medicines. Your son smeared the whole couch with glue and ran away. And the girl from the junior class lay down there to be examined. Her hair was stuck. She had to shave bald. These were the applications we received at home almost every day. For an oversight, parents punished him to the fullest extent, and at least he had something. Our dad was very strict with him, but this did not help in the least to reduce his leprosy. But they didn't see what I saw. Kirill was crying. He cried almost every night. At such moments, I felt sorry for him. When I tried to find out the matter, he kicked me out of the room and shouted, and I figured this was all from loneliness. Well, when we grew up, the situations with my brother became more ambitious. As a teenager, he got into trouble. Mom and Dad always fought over him and talked about divorce many times. The house was in a nightmare. I remember how one day Kira and I stayed at home together, and my parents stayed at a party. Mom called home and told me to go to bed. I went and fell asleep, and after a couple of hours, I heard the sound of a fire siren. With fright, my heart was ready to stop. In my pajamas, I ran out into the street and saw that the car had come to us. You know, he was bored and he called the firemen to our house to look at them up close. By this time our parents arrived home, they had to pay a tidy sum as a fine for a false call. After parents lashed out at Kirill, they sent us to bed. He immediately fell asleep in his room, but I couldn't sleep from the shock. I decided to have a snack. It was almost morning and accidentally I overheard a conversation between my parents. It turns out they weren't sleeping. Dad was beside himself with anger. I tried to raise him as a normal person. I bring him up as a family, but he doesn't want to listen at all. If he feels so bad with us, can we return him to his mother? Said Dad, nervously walking from side to side. What? So he's adopted? Is he not my brother? I shouted, thereby giving myself away. My parents get scared at the sight of me, but then they decided to talk to me. What they said left me speechless. I just couldn't believe it. How so? We grew up together, played together. Yes, the relationship was so-so, but I thought it was my own brother. It turns out that a very long time ago, when I was 2 years old, my mother left me at home with my father and went on business. That day, there was a terrible ice. My mother was in a hurry to go home. Lost control, her car hit a woman with a child. Fortunately, the baby was all right, but the woman was lying with a broken leg. My mother ran out to her, called an ambulance, and took the child to look after. The victim underwent surgery. My mom paid for the treatment in full and went to visit her every day. It turned out that woman had no one, no husband, no relatives, alone, without money, without work. All the time she was in the hospital, my mother looked after her son. When she was on the mend, she said that she had no complaints about my mother, or that she was a good person. Mom was glad because during that long month she experienced the most significant stress, worry for what woman and her little baby. On the day she was discharged from the hospital, my mother bought a beautiful suit for the woman's child, saved some money and went to the hospital, but there was nobody in the room. Mom and Dad ran, looked for her throughout the territory in disbelief, and then went to the doctor. The doctor handed out a note that said, "I see you are a good mother. You have a wonderful family. God sent you to me. I have no opportunity to raise my son, so I ask you to take care of him." She wrote and fled in an unknown direction. My parents were shocked. They did not know maybe this is a prank. How can you leave your own child to strangers? And the baby was so tiny that Mom and Dad simply could not send him to the boarding school. He stayed with us. We named him Kirill. That is why I do not remember his birth, his pregnant mother. Despite his behavior, I have always felt sorry for him. To some extent, I thought that he was alone. He, without realizing it, loved to be alone. Abandoned children suffer greatly. They become wild without mother's affection and care. But I tried, I really tried. I don't know what I have been doing wrong all these years. But he never managed to fall in love with us, said my mother and cried a lot. Dad and I hugged her tightly and began to calm her down. And then I told my mother that this story doesn't change anything. It isn't his fault that he was abandoned. It isn't his fault that his mother turned out to be unreliable. Or maybe she really had complete despair. Suddenly, we heard the front door slam shut. Dad ran into the corridor and saw Kira running away. My mother and I started shouting him, calling him by name. People looked at us and he ran as fast as he could. Father caught up with him and somehow held his hands. When we got there, I saw that he was hysterical. He cried so hard. I knew that I was not your own. There is no family photo with me. I'm not loved by my grandparents. I'm not like any of you. You will never accept me. I'll go look for my mother," he shouted, crying avidly. Kirill managed to escape and he almost got run over by a car. Then my mother exploded. "I know where she is. I've helped her all these years," she shouted. And he stopped. He came up to us and told us to take him to her immediately. Mom tried to translate the topic or postpone the idea for a couple of days, but Kirill insisted on his own. We went home, got into the car, and drove in an unknown direction. My parents didn't say a word, as did Kira and I. After about 1.5 hours of driving, we arrived at a village. After passing several houses, we saw a small, half-abandoned house. There was a pile of empty alcohol bottles in the yard. We were met by a woman. She was thin, dirty, with a devastating look and no emotion. She immediately understood what kind of boy was standing next to us and didn't even want to hug him. Kirill came running to her and began to shout, "Mom, Mom!" She didn't even hug him. She just looked into his eyes and called him a stranger. "If not for you, my husband would not have left me. He didn't want children, but I got pregnant with you. I still thank heaven for sending these people to me. I heard you are a terrible child. You came to me? What for? You ruined my whole life. I don't need you," the woman said. At that moment, I saw that my brother was hurt. He didn't know what to do and just stand there in silence. My mom came up to her and punched her in the face. The woman fell while cursing. "You don't deserve him," said Mom. My dad took Kira in his arms to the car. We left that place as we arrived, in silence. My brother didn't leave his room for a week. He didn't eat or drink. Parents tried to talk to him, but all their attempts ended in failure. He needed time to figure things out. Then he came up to them and said he wants to leave and that he understands he'll never be part of our family. "I only know how to destroy and nothing else. You don't have to pretend like I'm your son anymore," he said. Mom put her arms around his face and looked into his eyes. "I'm sorry that everything happened like this. I don't know why your mom did that, but you are not going anywhere, do you hear? You are my son, and I'm your mother. You have lived with us for 13 years and you will live on because I won't let you go anywhere," she said firmly and hugged me tightly. Kirill began to cry. This is probably done in a real family. They accept you with all the shortcomings, protect, worry, love, and care. Kira never remembered that woman again. He stopped destroying everything around him, and we became much closer than before. It's incredible how much love changes people.